part of it. We're now on week 3. We've been doing this a while now, and it's kind of starting to feel a little bit more normal, which I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm embracing it. I love seeing your faces. We're getting good attendance. And we've had some fantastic discussions. So I want to start with me and Thomas have been talking, and he's been kind of incorporating these quotes into his daily routine. Mr. Thomas Baker, you mind sharing them with us a little bit about what your quote of the day is?
The one I just shared with you?
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is the quote. It's from a guy named Joe Stumpf. I was on a call with him this morning, and he said, "And anxiety is more contagious than the virus."
I think me and Dan just briefly touched on this. I think mindset, guys, is so crucial to what we're doing now, and I hope that everybody's doing well with that. But I recognize it myself. I have those days and those moments where it's tough staying motivated and staying on task. And I think a lot of people are seeing that. Dan, have you had any experiences talking to some folks?
Yeah, I mean, starting week 3, I think we started to see the tide going out a little bit more. And that saying, like, when the tide goes out, you see you swimming naked. There are people that weren't prepared for this at all. And some of them are in our atmosphere, some of them are not. So it's just, I keep saying to myself and others, just, it's going to be fine. It's going to be okay, but most of our industry hasn't been in the 2007 crash. And I think that's gonna show some interesting things, but we've seen these behaviors before. And yeah, definitely have seen that.
Did you say you had four techniques that you're using just to kind of stay on task? Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things, Christina, did you guys see that sunset last night?
Yeah.
It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. So we ate outside, and it was like, we haven't been able to do that in a long time. But we had a good conversation, and there were 4 things that we really figured out that we need to focus on from an agent perspective, even right now, and just from a human perspective. One was vulnerability, both with each other and with our clients, being open, being like, hey, this is what I'm going through. And I talked to Ray about this before, and just appreciated him for being able to call and say, hey, this is stuff that's going on, and this is where we can help each other. So vulnerability. The other one was humility, being able to meet people where they are and listen. Like I'm excited about this call today, and because I want to hear you guys and what's going on. Toughness was one, not so much exterior toughness, but the toughness it takes to not listen to what's readily available and really decide to do something different and stick with it. And then obviously growth opportunities. Where are the growth opportunities right now? I was joking with Irvine that the Facebook Live was a growth opportunity 2 weeks ago. I didn't even know how to do it. It's probably routine to some of you guys. And now I know how to fix a light. I know how to do it and jump on and do something really quick. So that was one of my growth opportunities, but there's lots of other ones as well. So those 4: vulnerability, humility, toughness, and obviously growth opportunities that are happening right now.
Dan, you impressed me. Brian, Don, Justin, welcome to the call. I'd like to talk a little bit about that. You brought up some great points, and one of the big things was humility and being able to listen and meet people where they are. And I want to kind of hear from all of you, what are some things that you can share so that you're using to stay motivated, that you're using to stay on task. I just picked up Miracle Morning, and I hear some fantastic things about that, and I'm hoping to put into place some better habits that are helping keep me where I'm going, or where I know I need to go. Clinton, do you have anything that you've incorporated over the last 2+ weeks that are kind of helping stay?
I'm just trying to keep a schedule. I want to make sure I try to work out in the morning if possible. And then I spend a lot of time just reaching out to clients. You may not know this, but I was in New York City when September 11th happened. And this reminds me so much of that, when we went through this phase where, people were just really pulling back and really sensitive, and really would take the time to appreciate each other. So I've really been trying to recall a lot of what that was like and make my calls from just feeling like they're humanity calls. And I think I mentioned that to you the other day, but they do get around to talking about the market, but that's not the reason for my call. And people are so open right now. And I think it's a moment in time that will pass. And I think that it's a great time to, you know, just make these connections with people because they're listening.
Thank you, man. I love that. And obviously 9/11 different circumstances, but I like that you're able to pull from past experiences and kind of implement some of the things that you used almost 20 years ago now. Holy cow. Into what we're seeing today, because it's a lot of the unknown for a lot of people. And I think that's what's almost most scary about it. As Thomas said, the anxiety is almost worse than the actual virus. Michael, are you doing anything? Clinton brought up, you know, keeping a calendar, and I personally, and I know Dan and Brian, we talked about, you know, we had to reformat and restructure our calendar. Have you had to do the same? What are you doing to stay on task and motivated? Anything like that?
Yeah, just trying to even fabricate a few things that I wouldn't normally have to put on a schedule, but trying to do it and getting good at a Zoom call. And I've been just going around to different business people that I've done business with, you know, for a long time, and kind of like doing a Zoom interview with them. You know, if they're a financial planner, insurance sales, window washer, you know, roofer, painter, whatever, and just getting on a Zoom call with them, and I'll record the call and then post it to Facebook. You know, and it kind of promotes them a little bit. They appreciate it. You know, they're grateful for the opportunity. And it also just gives some good perspective, like what's going on with each of them, how has their life changed, that sort of stuff. As far as scheduling though, yeah, you know, I'm really grateful that I have this little office I can come down to, but I've got 5 kids and most of them are pretty big kids. They're like adult sized kids. And, you know, they're all at home. Even the one that doesn't live at home is like at our house pretty much every day. And so having a place, you know, that I can get to get some work done helps. In fact, it's so productive at the office. I actually have my 2 high schoolers in my conference room next door because they get more done here. So yeah, having a space and just a concentrated amount of time to get some things done definitely helps me out a lot.
Yeah. I'm the same. I need that constructive space. I need that place where I can go to stay productive. That's helped a lot, is being able to recognize, like, I have to be in an area and surround myself with things that allow me to continue to produce and do constructive things. Let's see, Peter, anything that you can add to that, bud?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots, I think, to talk about perhaps today. I wanted to sort of echo Clinton's sentiment, just that I think empathy goes a long way right now. And that's with each other, with our clients, with our various vendors. You know, certainly CAR being able to get real estate listed as an essential service has changed things drastically for all of us in the last week. And so if I can just sort of maybe take a minute to talk about maybe some nuts and bolts of sort of what's happened since we all spoke last Wednesday. You know, I think it goes without saying that everybody that's on this call's health and safety certainly comes first. And that is not to be sort of understated, right? What they're going through in New York right now. I mean, that's where I grew up and I've got a lot of friends back there right now, and, you know, they're in it. And if that's any indication of where we'll be in 3 weeks, then it's sort of no time to let our guard down right now. That said, we are going to continue to push forward in the real estate world. We are going to continue to do business. But we all need to exercise extreme caution. We all need to get educated on proper protocol. And we need to not only look after ourselves, but it's our clients, the people that might come into a vacant property after us, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a few things that I sort of wanted to just take a minute with, Ray, if that's okay, if I can have a few minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's dive into it. I wanted to bring up a couple things, and if you're all right, just take the floor and we'll kind of continue the conversation as we go.
Yeah, so CAR did issue obviously the best practices, which was emailed out to everybody, and thank you to Robin for getting that out there. You know, those guidelines are not to supersede our local ordinances. So right now I'm trying to find out if there are any local San Diego ordinances that might supersede what CAR has put out there, but certainly that is something that they stated. But basically just going off of the CAR guidelines, anybody that's going to be in the field, so any one of us that are going to be out there, whether it's a vacant listing, whether it's any activity that is putting you, let's say, at risk, you really need to log in and go check out the How to Protect Yourself website that the CDC put out there. So it's right there. It's a hyperlink on the CAR guidelines, but just get educated on that. Couple other things is that there are new addendums that have come out in the last 24 or 48 hours beyond the CV. So get familiar with the new CVA. But on top of that, they've come out with 2 other disclosures that if you're taking a listing, I would highly recommend that you add the RLACAA. Right. And so that is basically and Don can maybe speak to this in more detail when I get done talking here, but that's basically a form on the listing side where the CVA was more geared towards the buy side. But then there's also what is called the PEAD, and that is basically the protocol for entry into a property and proper protocol and safety procedures that should be followed anytime you're entering any sort of listing. And it should be stated, guys, that, look, all of your safety is paramount, right? I think that there are some people that are taking this lightly, and I think that might be foolish at this juncture. I mean, San Diego hasn't really fully felt the effect of what's possible. But from all the research I've done, we'll know in 2 to 3 weeks sort of where we're at. And again, so I can't emphasize enough that your all safety is the most important thing. And of course, the safety of the other people that follow you and your clients and so on and so forth. But if you are going to be out there, then take a minute to read the CAR quick guide. Take a minute to get also familiar with the NUCC. I don't know if you've all seen that yet, but basically there's the NUCC, there's the CVA, there's the RLACAA, and there's the PEAD. So that is 4 new CAR forms that have come out specifically in direct response to the coronavirus situation that we're in. And if I may, maybe just open this up so that I don't hog the mic here, but maybe open this up to Dawn for a second to elaborate on some of those forms. Dawn, if you want to speak, yeah?
Hi. Yes, so as Pete said, we have 4 new forms that have come out. I don't know if you guys have seen the new coronavirus addendum. There was that original one that came out a couple of days ago. It feels like it was months. It was only a couple of days. They have since revised it. Before it defaulted to that 30-day extension. Now you have to check a box, and it's a little bit better for everybody. And with that now is a notice of unforeseen coronavirus circumstances. So the buyer or the seller now can actually go through and list the reasons that they're being affected by the coronavirus in order to ask for the extensions, the cancellation, or the refund of the deposit. So those are cool. The other 2 that Pete was just talking about, there came out with a listing agreement, coronavirus addendum or amendment. This is what you would be giving to your sellers on your listing agreements, and it is an addendum or an amendment. So if you have current listings, you may want to think about putting this on. I'm waiting for the CAR Legal webinar tomorrow.
Hey, Dawn.
Yes.
Hey, Dawn, it's Brian. Hey, thank you so much. I want to interject real quick, and thank you guys for going over. I want to make sure that everyone's really paying attention, because this is not you might want to. I'm letting everybody know right now, every single listing that you have must have this addendum. Every listing. If you have an active listing, get the addendum signed. If you have a listing in escrow, get the addendum signed and pay attention to it. You have to check boxes A through G on the residential listing addendum. So make sure you check the appropriate boxes. And if you have a buyer, or if you are personally going to take anybody into a home, or if you're going to allow anyone to go into any listing you have, you must require them to sign the PEAD addendum.
And just to jump in on that real quick, the purpose of these forms, guys, is obviously from a liability standpoint. It's to educate your clients as to the risks. So it's to protect you as an agent. It's also to protect our office. So these things work for all parties. It's not just to protect our office. It's to protect every single person involved in the transaction. So Brian's 100% right. They are not optional anymore. They are mandatory until further notice.
Perfect. And those two newest ones that Brian just spoke about, as of this afternoon, they still were not populating in zip forms. However, I do have copies of them that I'm happy to email out and post on the Facebook group as well, or I can get them to Robin so she can get out to everybody. I believe Carr is working on getting them in zip forms, Elizabeth. But until then, we do have, it was really hard to find them last night. I think they tried to hide them.
Does everybody understand that? Any questions about the required documents now? Has everyone seen them? We'll absolutely get them from Dawn. If you can email those over, we'll email them out and post them on the Facebook page as well. But any questions about the documents that we've seen? Good?
Nope.
Fantastic, guys. Dan, anything you want to add to that? Oh, hold on, bud. You're on mute.
There you go.
Go ahead.
First day on Zoom. No, I'm kidding. So just some questions. Like what I'm really curious about right now are what practices you guys have put in place to adapt to continue to do business. Those are some big questions I want to learn from you guys, because I'm definitely not the smartest guy in the room. Everybody would be in trouble. And also, what are best practices, and what are things that you think you'll continue doing to continue to be on our goals as we go forward? Because this is changing a lot of industry, a lot of the ways we do business, and ways you are staying connected that we can maybe adopt. Is that a few questions for everyone?
I love that, Dan. And Clinton and Michael both spoke to, staying true to a calendar and more or less staying true to a routine. And I think all of us here have really had to kind of rebuild that calendar and routine. Chad, I'd love to pick on you a little bit, man. Anything that you can add to Dan's question? What have you done to kind of reformat your business, and what do you see maybe continuing in the future?
Well, I think this has been good for a lot of us. It's forced me to do a lot of things that I was putting off. I bought into AM Cards, which is a system that sends handwritten cards to your clients. I've been paying monthly for it, and I haven't been using it. And now I finally took the time to sit down and dig into that system, used it, mailed out a bunch of cards. And then getting good on Zoom calls is another one. And then for me, the biggest one coming up is going to be making my listing presentation digital. So I can do it remotely, or when we get back in front of people, I can put it on the TV and do it that way. I've been doing paper forever, so that's my new goal, is to get that done.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I kind of want to jump in there too. I think on a positive note, guys, that if we all do embrace some of these changes, that when the market picks up again, like what Chad just spoke to, he should be able to do more business by having a digital presentation. Instead of spending 45 minutes driving each way to a potential listing, if he can still lock that listing down with a digital presentation, he could do 3 in the time it takes him to do 1, if you will, and reallocate that time to more lead gen or whatever the case may be. And I think that for those of us that are healthy and have this window basically to embrace scrubbing your database, revamping your marketing, whatever the case may be, look at it as a real opportunity here. We're going to be in this for no less than another month in this sort of type of environment where it feels like a lockdown. They'll reevaluate in a month's time. We'll see where we're at, but it could be 6 weeks. We don't know yet, but it is real. And I will tell you, I know I mentioned it earlier, but the 6 degrees of separation of real stories, because I know a lot of us here in San Diego may or may not have really sort of felt the seriousness of this. Maybe we don't know anybody yet that's sort of been affected or has even passed away, but at least from my standpoint, with my connection to where I grew up in New York, the 6 degrees has turned into 5 degrees and 4 degrees. And I fear that it's going to get worse as far as that's concerned. And again, I want to emphasize safety, But I also want to emphasize, like, look, we're all positive people, and we should be a positive force in our community. We should be the ray of sunshine to those that are down and that kind of thing. Like, I'm all about that, but let's just definitely be safe. Yeah.
Thank you, bud. Yeah, absolutely. And Chad, thank you again, man. I like what you said. I think that some of these changes that we're implementing are going to continue well after this. And I like that you're building habits. Mark, if I can pick on you as well, you've been with us on a lot of these Zoom calls, and we've talked specifically about some of the things that you're doing in your business. Can you elaborate and share some of the changes in your schedule that you've incorporated and some of the ways that you're going to continue with those habits and those, I guess, those trends going forward?
Yeah, you know, like Pete said, this is a time of unknown. Like, we don't know when we're going to come out of it. You see that football helmet on his head, right? So, you know, I'm planting the seeds now because I'm looking 90 days out. You know, I'm looking into the future. This is forcing me to go out of my comfort zone, like Chad said, kind of implementing things that have been back on the back shelf for a while, because let's face it, everybody's routine has changed. Like, you wake up and you don't do the same things you would if we had to be in the office today physically. So there's a lot of differences. So I'm just, you know, I'm me personally, from the data that I see, obviously I think we're going to be in a deep buyer's market. So I think I'm switching a lot of my focus to the buyers. I'm looking at non-owner occupied. I'm working with my title reps to get, you know, maybe adopt a specific condo building, and, you know, just reaching out, obviously touching my sphere, making those calls like Clinton had said, you know, just well-being calls, and you know, just being present. But it's the nice thing about it is it's actually forcing me to do the things that I didn't want to do before, because I'm completely out of element right now. So it's, you know, again, I'm just looking 90 days down the road, because, you know, there's not much we can do today.
Mark, you look like you're in your element right at this moment.
We could all be as fortunate.
I am. My wife and I are sharing office space, so she had a 12 o'clock. So I thought I'd take it outside because it's absolutely beautiful today.
Soaking up some sunshine.
Yeah.
Mark, thank you, man.
Can I share with you guys like a script that one of the Nikki Klein out of Florida put this out, and you guys may have it, and I'll post it later. But it's about getting people to do now business and why they should. And so I'll post the script, but I wanted to read it real quick if you have some time.
Yeah.
When you're talking to your clients, I believe that now is the time to put your home on the market. We have a captive audience that has nothing to do but look at your property online every day. By the time we are no longer in quarantine, buyers will be chomping at the bit to get into your home while other sellers are just getting prepared. So that's one of the scripts that create urgency around it, because we don't know what the other side's going to look like, right? But we know that it probably won't be less competition, there'll probably be more. Mr. Seller, we will likely have your home under contract at a higher price before the other sellers have had time to go to market. Due to the quarantine, a lot of sellers are hesitant, which is great for you. We anticipate a lot of homes being put on the market when the quarantine is lifted, which will mean a lot more competition and likely lower prices. If your concern is days on the market, the world is on lockdown and buyers understand homes are more challenging to sell over the quarantine period, which means days on the market are anticipated. So just some things like to create urgency to where 90 days out, I don't know, I guess maybe I'm greedy or something, but I don't want to wait 90 days to have all that stuff come to fruition. And those are some real truths that logically can counteract the emotion.
Right. And why not accept that challenge, right? Like, how great would it be to get listings virtually without, like, you know?
Save us a lot of
don't get me wrong. I'm not stopping business right now. I'm just looking the next 90 days, because obviously our market's going to go through a huge shift. We got to build back consumer confidence. We have to have the right things to say. We can't speak in speculation. We have to speak with facts. We have to show them the numbers.
Yeah.
By any means, I mean, I'll practice safe protocol and go show properties if it's relevant. But I'm just talking about the next 90 days on how am I going to shift my business into this new market that's going to arise from this, because I think it's definitely going to have an impact in the next 90.
I think you're totally right. I just wanted to add more value to it. So
I want to jump in real quick on that note too, Mark, and maybe Jimmy can jump in here as well. But I think all of us as buyer's agents and listing agents need to get familiar with where the lending world is at right now, because if you're going to risk your sellers opening up their house, let's say, to a party that can't even get a loan, that's just foolish. And so from what I understand, and Jimmy, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the jumbo loan market has taken a hit in that things have tightened up quite a bit. The conventional financing is still great, and rates are back down again from they were at 3.25, they went up to 4.5, and now it seems like they're back down to 4 or less. But FHA and VA are still very viable. And yeah, Jimmy, I mean, maybe you speak to this, but before you do.
But you're so good at it. Why? You got the 3 C's, man.
But the 4 C's, Jimmy.
Whatever.
But real quick on that, though, all of us need to know just enough about financing to know whether or not somebody's even qualified, because why risk the exposure if they're not?
Right.
So
you need to touch on some like main bullet points.
Please.
Okay. So Cal HAFA has been suspended. That's the lenders that we have that do it. I don't know if it's across the board, but that's just, Ray and I were talking about one this morning. We can't do them right now. Cal HAFA is the zero down program.
Down payment assistance, yeah.
FHA now requires a 640 FICO, and some of the debt ratio requirements are a little bit tighter. Conventional is still good to go. Jumbo, Pete, you're correct. They kind of, our jumbo lenders kind of, for the most part, have been shut off. There are some portfolio lenders that'll still do them, but the options are much more limited than before. And that's anything over 700,000. Actually, no, we can go to 726, I think, because we can do the nationwide. Anyway, if you have a scenario, email me and I'll look it up. The big thing though that you want to consider is that on Fannie and Freddie, we are no longer allowed to give credit for rental income. So if someone is buying a rental property, usually we can give them 75% of whatever the market rent is. We can't do that anymore. And if they're buying a primary and they have rental properties, they now need either 6 or 12 months in reserves in order to count any of the rental income for those properties. So make sure your borrowers are aware of that. That's new this week.
Good. And Jimmy, we talked earlier this week about some of those like fringe buyers that are ending up falling out. Can you talk a little bit about that while we've got everybody?
Well, that was mostly FHA people that are under 640 FICO. So if you have someone who's just kind of squeezing in there on FHA, they might have trouble getting funding right now. That 640 is the main threshold.
Jimmy, can you speak a little bit to FHA in more detail? Because that's obviously a government-backed loan in a way that it's not going to disappear. And is that the most viable option for buyers these days?
Well, if you have basically bad credit, that's kind of like the go-to, because you can do it with 3.5% down, and that has not changed. Down payment requirement hasn't changed, and you used to be able to do it. Your debt ratio used to be you could go as high as 55, sometimes even higher. That's being dropped down, especially if you have a lower FICO. Now it's 45.
So the point of this, guys, is that the buyer's pool is going to shrink because there's going to be less available financing for those buyers, right?
Correct.
And there's other forces in the market too that, are going to play in, and Brian Kane, I'm sure, could speak to this in much more detail, but supply and demand is going to be an issue, which is going to be a force that helps probably keep values up a bit. But look, we're the professionals. And so these discussions are what are great, because this is the information you can then carry into the conversations you have with your clients about why to list right now. Take advantage of the lending where it is today, as opposed to waiting. Yeah.
That actually is a good transition. I want to talk about some market stats that I've pulled and some things that we're seeing. First and foremost, Peter, thank you again, and Jimmy, thank you so much for sharing and helping guide us through the financial stuff. When it comes to, Peter, as you alluded to, supply, demand, and inventory, we're already seeing the effects of the coronavirus on the market. So I quoted some numbers yesterday that were a little off, but I do want to make sure that everybody knows a pretty telling stat. The number of listed properties in March officially as of this morning were 3,890. Those are new listings in the month of March, okay? Now, when we look at that and we put it up against the number of listed properties in February, that was 3,888. So for the most part, business as usual when it comes to listings taken, okay? When we start to look at other numbers though, specifically the number of properties that went pending from March 1st to March 31st, that's where we start to see a discrepancy. Okay, typically for the first 2 months of the year and even part of last year, the number of pending against the number of new active listings were pretty equal, which meant our inventory stayed the same. Okay, since the shelter in place, which was March 20th, we had 1,162 new listings hit the market, and we've had 795 go pending. Okay, so they're basically the number of active listings versus the number of pendings. If you kind of break this up over 2 weeks, new listings are outpacing pendings by 200 units. That's a significant difference. That's 400 sides per week. That's going to be a massive difference in business. Okay, and what we're looking at, and Jimmy kind of spoke to it as well as a few others, Mark, we're looking at heading into what would be considered a buyer's market. Inventory is going up. We haven't seen a slowdown in listings taken, which is fantastic. Listings are power, and yet we need to really start gearing for more of a buyer's market. As the lending guidelines change, as we have a buyer pool that's shrinking, our months of inventory is going to go up. It was at 1.4 in February, 1.4 months of inventory. Okay, the numbers for March aren't out yet, but I would be really surprised if that number doesn't start to incrementally shoot up. By the end of April, we're going to be looking at a very different market. A big takeaway, guys, one last little thing that I want to share. We still have 5,000 homes on market. Okay, so pretty sizable inventory, and this is San Diego County. A big thing that I saw, there were 178, based on the numbers that I was able to get, 178 properties withdrawn in March. That sounds like a lot until you look at the month of February that had 198 withdrawn. So if you're talking to a seller and you're going into a listing appointment, this is information that you can give them to kind of appease some of their worries. We're still seeing listings hit the market, and we're definitely not seeing as much buyer activity.
Ray, do you know what the numbers were for days on market at the very end of February?
So it hasn't changed much. Actually, it went down, Peter. It was 24, if I remember correctly, in February, and 19, I think, for March.
Do you expect that to correct in the opposite direction?
Absolutely. I think, yeah. And I'd love to get your guys' feedback. Sonia, I'm sure that you study the market. What are your thoughts? You know, I think days of market is absolutely going to increase. We're going to start to shift when it comes to leverage. What are your opinions on that? Have you seen anything already or have some input?
I just looked at the numbers a couple of days ago, and I didn't see a big shift in numbers yet, but it's just starting here to hit us. What I don't think that the buyer pool will go much down based on listening to Buffini, because a lot of people are stuck at home and they are now seeing that they don't like the house, that it's too small, they're outgrown it, and they actually want to move and buy a house that's going to become he said the castle. Like, I'm happy in my house. I can live here for the rest of my life. Like, I feel secure and I have enough space, but I think a lot of people are not going to feel the same. And they realize now they have a landlord that they have to deal with. There's a lot of not security. So I personally believe right now we're actually going to see a lot of buyers hit the market that haven't really been in there before.
Yeah,
and I didn't think about that. The cabin fever aspect. I like that.
That's Sonia. That's a really neat point that you make, and I think something that those of us that went through 07 and 08 together, the difference in this one is that people actually have equity. You know, at that time it was all stated income, stated assets, neg-am loans, 100% finance. You know, this is different in that there's a lot of people out there that are sitting on cash or they're sitting on equity. So there are buyers that, even though financing is getting tighter, there are buyers that still have means, and that should not be understated either.
I like that you said that, because yeah, in the last market, people were house poor and cash rich because they took it all out of their house, and now we're seeing, you know, cash poor and house rich, and they're gonna have to make some decisions, especially if unemployment's involved or some other things about. I said this on another call the other day. It was, can you imagine being at your house right now and hating your kitchen, right? Because you're every day, and at the end of this, that's what I want. I want a new kitchen. I just want to get out of here, whatever it is. So those thoughts are going through people's minds, like something said.
Yeah, I had also like couple people reach out thinking about selling their investment property.
Yeah.
Just within the last week, they're like, hey, maybe we want to sell because we don't know what's happening. We don't, you know, it's very uncertain, and they rather pull out all the money they have and say, you know, have the cash sitting somewhere than being tied up in the market. So that was something that I didn't expect either, that like out of nowhere, people are like, hey, I think I want to sell my investment. What are your thoughts? So I'm learning to shift my mindset and the scripts on, yeah, of course you want to sell your investment. But, you know, like it comes back to the security. They want to have cash in the pocket to know that if times come even worse, they have money sitting somewhere.
And I wonder if there's anybody here that can shed some light on what a 1031 would look like for those investors that are maybe looking to, because I'm not, it's my understanding that this would constitute what they call a federal disaster that would prolong the location period and the closing period for a 1031 exchange for an investor that's looking to sell their property and maybe pick up additional properties. You could sell one, and if the market does in fact take a downturn, you might be able to pick up two or multi-units. Anybody have any insight into that? Michael, you deal with some investments, right?
Yeah, it'd be better probably to talk to an accommodator that knows about these rules, you know, instead of us conjecturing. But there's, you know, in my experience, when you do have that time frame to identify the new property, there's a number of things, you know, you can write a letter and tell the IRS and get an extension. It's not always that difficult to do. So in these circumstances, my guess would be, and again, we need to clear this with an accommodator, an advisor, you know, an intermediary that actually does this for a living. But yeah, I think an investor shouldn't be worried about time frames, that there's plenty of time and there's some opportunity.
Yeah, I'm involved in one right now. The relinquished property is in escrow in Arizona, and you know, I've been showing this client. We wrote offers last week, but the good inventory still has a lot of competition. On Sunday, I showed them 4 properties, and the first one, there was an agent when I got there. They handed off the key to me. And then when I was leaving, there was another agent waiting. Same with the second one. Multiple offers on the first one. Wasn't that great a property. The second one was very well priced, and they had multiple offers on that. We didn't win the race on that one. So we've heard rumors that there will be, I've heard on the news that there may be extensions for these things, but the IRS hasn't come out with any guidance on it yet. But I think what Michael said is, you know, if you're in touch, if you have a good facilitator on your team, then that's who you should need to talk to. If you don't have a good facilitator, DM me and I'll give you the one that I use.
I appreciate that, Thomas. And Michael, thank you as well. But we'll definitely get some information on that. And Sonia, you brought up some great points. Thank you again for sharing. Z and Kim, while we got you, anything that you guys have seen that you can lend some insight regarding the market?
Not too much, but I mean, we're still opening and closing escrows. We received another 3 new ones this week, or 4. I can't remember. But I mean, they're closing. Everything's on schedule. We don't see any slowness on our end anyway. And we had a great March, so.
Good.
I think
Thanks for keeping the energy alive too, Z. You and Kim, keeping the energy alive too. Your in-house workouts and things like that.
Dance offs.
Hey, we gotta make this fun. We're the only ones coming here, and actually, I'm not complaining because I have 2 teenage boys at home and my daughter from New York, so they can all battle each other all day. I'll just come to the office, so I'm totally fine coming in every day.
That's awesome. So cool.
You guys got to get a TikTok. We can make this go viral. I feel like.
I don't even know what TikTok is.
I'll send you a link. We'll get it together.
It'll open up your world, Z.
I want some
God, I don't need
manager
it. I'm
fee.
too old for that. Too old.
Last thing before we go, guys, obviously, and I think everybody's aware now that real estate was named an essential business on Sunday. Peter, I'd like to specifically kind of pick your brain and just if you would, I do want to elaborate on what that means. And just to be clear, it is not business as usual, guys. There are still restrictions that Peter's already touched on, but if you don't mind, can we kind of dive into what that entails?
Yeah, I mean, the bullet points are anything that you can do virtually, you must do virtually. Open houses, obviously still a no-go. Showings with extreme caution and proper protocol, including sanitizer, gloves, if available, not more than 3 people in the property at a time. If that means people waiting in the car outside and taking turns, every single precaution needs to be taken, because at this juncture, I've listened to a lot of different articles and write-ups, I'm sure y'all have too, but whether or not this virus can be aerosoled, whether it's droplets, how far it can travel, how long it lives on an inorganic surface like a countertop or a refrigerator or a doorknob, I don't even know if the scientists fully have that figured out, and we all certainly don't know the exact answers to that. So extreme caution needs to be taken when actually out in the field. So that's sort of one aspect of this. The other aspect is the liability side, which is where the disclosures come in. Going through those 4 new disclosures, and as Brian mentioned, they are now, as far as our office is concerned, mandatory, not optional. And that's to protect you guys, the office itself, our clients, the people who follow behind us. But I would really recommend that everybody gets familiar with the 4 new forms. And sort of just to reiterate those, we've got the PEAD, which is regarding entry into a property and best practices there. There's the RLACAA, which is an educational disclosure for your sellers. There is the CVA, which is geared towards the buyers. And then there is the NUCC, which is the Notice of Unforeseen Coronavirus virus circumstances. So at the end of the day, like if we were to compartmentalize this, there is the virtual aspect of it, there's the field aspect of it, and then there's the disclosure aspect of it. And the disclosures are obviously imperative and mandatory, but I can't emphasize enough that, look, I don't know how much you guys are all following it, but this is not just taking the lives of the elderly and those with pre-existing suppressed immune systems. There are plenty of cases now of young, healthy people, 20-year-old, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50, you name it. So, and it's not just about our own health, right? It's those that come behind us. I just can't overstate that. So I'm not saying don't practice real estate. We're all here to practice real estate. We just need to change the way we do it, and we need to be very careful in how we go about it. But I think that's the right way to look at it is 3 buckets, right? So there's the disclosure bucket, the paperwork side of things, there's the field practice, and then there's the virtual, online, and anything that you can do to sort of revamp your business. And listen, when we come out of this, those tools aren't going away. I firmly believe there's going to be a new way to do real estate going forward. And a lot of these practices that we're engaging in now are going to live beyond this virus. And that probably will more relate to just reducing our carbon footprint as an industry, in general. But yeah, I mean, look, if you guys have questions, we have our attorney, Eric Ginder, on staff. You've got myself, you've got Dawn. There's plenty of resources to reach out to. And Justin Flisher, you cold chilling over there, man. What's happening?
I'm just chilling, staying safe.
Good for you. Is anybody here wearing pants today, by the way, or are we all?
Oh, why would I wear pants?
Everything.
But yeah, guys, I mean, obviously stay positive, be optimistic, but also be pragmatic, be realistic. I think, Ray, you nailed it on the head. Like, whether we want to believe it or not, we're in the shift. Right now, it's looking like it is going to turn into a buyer's market soon enough. So prepare for that.
Hey, Pete, this is Armando. Quick question on that PEAD, just kind of looking through it briefly. Are we getting anybody that goes into that house signing that? Photographer,
Look, this is definitely a disclose document where even if you hired an appraiser, I would get them to sign it. And be careful on how you share the pen even. I mean, think about that too, right? Like maybe email it via DocuSign before the appraiser comes out to the property. Physical inspectors. I mean, I've talked to a lot of physical inspectors who are really bullish. Like they're like, whatever, I talked to one guy who was like, oh, I've lived through 15 pandemics, and this, this one's no worse than the others. And, and it's funny, but it's not funny. And so I would have anybody that you instruct or you guide into a property, I would have all of them sign it to protect your butt, the office's butt, and everybody involved.
This is not just buyer and seller and escrow. This is anybody going through the property, correct?
If you're going to be responsible for guiding somebody into a property, then that liability may fall on you. You should have them sign it. Absolutely.
Armando, that's a great question. Does that answer?
Brian, do you mind?
I stepped away. I stepped away just for a second, so in case this was already covered. I know that there's one agent on this call. Sonia, you asked the question about tenant-occupied properties. The PEAD form specifically states that the tenant needs to sign that. So if you are taking a listing, it's tenant-occupied. If you must have the tenant sign that in order for anybody to come in the home. Just giving 24 hours notice is not good enough. The tenant must sign that PEAD form.
And do it via DocuSign, guys. Trading pens is just as risky as any other, sharing shopping carts or whatever. So just set it up before you go.
Armando, does that answer what you were thinking?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. And before we go, let's end on a happy note. Clinton, I know you put out some of the best marketing pieces of anybody in the office. Do you have any, or anybody really, do you guys have any vendors that we're using for some of the virtual open houses, photography? Virtual staging is something that Armando and I were talking about. Oh, hold on. Clinton, you're on mute. Give me 1 sec.
I know I posted a link for one of mine.
Is it on Facebook?
It's in the chat. It's in the chat.
Okay, gotcha.
Thomas, it's not, I don't think it's called the chat room anymore. Those are the AOL days.
It says Zoom chat room right on the freaking title.
Hey, you use Virtuance, Thomas?
Yeah.
Awesome. Clinton, what about you, bud?
I just actually walked through with a videographer one of my listings in Rancho Santa Fe, and I think you might have connected with him. But we just decided to do a walkthrough just as if I was showing a client the property and how I would go from room to room and the path that I would take. And then he edited it and made it look good so that it showed off the property in a good light. So it was my first virtual sort of open house walkthrough. It was kind of interesting. So that's one thing I'm trying to incorporate. And then secondly, I really want to get my listing presentation, I know this was said earlier, digitally. And I want to have that accessible and not, have to go put it down in front of someone. I want to send it, in advance. So
yeah,
that's something I'm working on.
I love it. Thank you for sharing. Brian, you had a vendor that you were using for virtual staging and was it 360
Yeah,
photography plan?
so last week, Robin sent out emails with the company information. Tour 360 is just happens to be one company who's doing 3D tours using Matterport. You guys can simply Google Matterport San Diego. There's several vendors who do 3D photos. Tour 360 had just had some solicitation emails at $200 a 3D photo session, which I thought was a good deal. If you guys are like me, I'm getting all sorts of text messages and emails now from all these 3D photographers soliciting business. So
Yeah.
there should be no shortage of vendors out there for everybody.
Thank you, bud. I appreciate it. And we'll continue to share those vendors with you guys as we go. I want to respect everybody's time. We're coming up on 1 o'clock. I can't say thanks enough to everybody for joining. Always a pleasure. It's good to see your faces. Before we go, I want to just kind of recap. Dan said something that I think was really powerful at the beginning when he talked about the four, just kind of the four things that we're tackling and four areas that we're tightening up and addressing. And one of the things that he brought up was vulnerability and being willing to share. And one thing that I was taught by a great mentor of mine is that everybody struggles. Everybody's going through these ups and downs. And you know, it's been written in a number of books. The only time you really fail is when you stop and when you give up. So guys, I can't say thank you enough to continuing to show up, continuing to persevere and chug along with us. I know that times are different and we're all kind of going through those hills and valleys, but if you need absolutely anything, please reach out. Please let us know. We're absolutely, we're here to make sure that you guys are taken care of. And we thank you so much for your participation, your input, your insight. And if nothing else, does anybody have any questions before we wrap? All right, guys, thank you again. I can't say thanks enough for joining. We will see you guys hopefully tomorrow at 12 o'clock. Have a good rest of the day, guys. Enjoy your Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Everybody stay safe.
Sonia, Morgan,
Bye,
thank you.
everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.